Sujiwa is State Minister of International Trade of Sri Lanka. He's a lawyer by training. He's been a member of the Sri Lankan Parliament since 2010, and he's also a Deputy Minister of Justice. Luis Fernando is President of Bancoldex in Colombia, and he's been CEO of the Barranquilla Chamber of Commerce and has a wealth of experience in both public and private sectors. And Arbi is Deputy Mayor of the city of Tirana in Albania. He was also Deputy Minister of Education and Sports, and he's been at the top of a variety of civil movements in Albania for several years. So they come from very, very different backgrounds. They operate at different levels of government, and they operate on different levels of policy making. But they all share a trademark of what we call, and it's an overused phrase, but in this case I think it's very appropriate, authentic leadership. They've chosen to find the best solutions for either their countries or their organizations, even if those solutions sometimes appear idiosyncratic or challenge a lot of orthodoxies. We're going to hear from all of them individually, and then Robert Lawrence, Professor of International Trade at the Kennedy School and former member of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, will talk to them about the challenges they've faced and what they've learned along the way. And I suspect what they've learned is going to be as interesting as the theory they started with. After that, it'll be coffee time. But first of all, could the panel please come up? And we'll start with Sawiya. And let's give them a round of applause. They're very, very brave to be doing this.
You go.
Yeah.
Morning to all of you. Is it working? Is my mic working?
Is the mic working?
Well, I think after all, the eloquent speaker is going to be a difficult task. I'm not a great speaker. Thank you. Politician for 15 years, elected politician. But I'll try my best to do justice to my presentation. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, CID, Kennedy School, and Harvard for giving me this opportunity, and especially my country as well. You're doing a great job with our progress. And how many of you would know where Sri Lanka is? That's great. If you ask 100 Americans where Sri Lanka is, I think you might get a positive, 2 or 3 answers. Anyway, if since all of you know where Sri Lanka is, let me give you a bit of a history of Sri Lanka. 3,500 years of rich history. Under colonial rule for about 450 years, Portuguese, Dutch, the English. In 1948, we got our independence. 77, we liberalized the economy. It was a dream economy then, 8.2 growth rate at that stage. And we had an unfortunate civil war, which ran for about 30 years because of what you spoke about earlier. In 1948, when we got independence, the leaders from both communities, from Sinhalese and the Tamils, said 2 languages, 1 nation, 1 language, 2 nations. So in 1956, we made Sinhala 1 language, and we created this monster, a terrorist group which had an army, navy, and air force, one of the most brutal terrorist groups in the world. So even though we had a healthy start in 1977, 30 year of war actually kind of destroyed us. And my party, which was instrumental in 1977 to bring that development, garment industry, hydropower, exhausted. 95% of the country's hydropower was exhausted by my government in the 70s, when other countries have not even imagined. And with the war, 9 of our leaders were murdered, including the president, the next in line, and we had a dark period. But fortunately, in 2009, I think one of the few countries which defeated terrorism by means of war, Now they call it the US and the West, they call it the Sri Lankan system. And now we have a beautiful, peaceful country, and we are very hopeful for the future, and we call it the tipping point for Sri Lanka. And if I give you a outlook of the Sri Lankan economy, as you see, population 20 million, labor force 8.3, unemployment 4.3, literacy rate 93, and our main exports growth rate is about average 5.5%. Main exports to US, UK, India, and Germany. And we are located in an ideal spot in the world. If you take from the colors, population given in billion, 1 billion, the green consists of 1 billion, and all the colors 1 billion. If you see where Sri Lanka is, there's 4 billion in that small region, with a growth rate of 4.5% growth rate, average growth rate. So huge potential for the future. But unfortunately, as I told you, because of the war, for about 20 years we have not grown. Hardly anything we produce in Sri Lanka. After the garment industry, a good example is in 94, Sri Lankan garment industry was about 3 billion. Bangladesh, it was about 2.5 billion. And at present, Bangladesh is about 24 billion, and ours is about 5 billion. So we didn't grow. We didn't get into perennial, only we were dependent on perennial industries, service sector, tourism, and then the garment trade. So at the moment, we made a lot of changes. Actually, we came into my government came into power under the premise of good governance, democracy, rule of law, and transparency. And we have done really well since 2015 January. My president was invited for the G7, and we were called the champions of democracy. And this is a result of Harvard coming forward, CID coming forward, ITC, World Bank, all helping us to revive our economy now. So we are in a good position. And we have things to actually rectify in the country. Approval for new investments. Our ease of doing business rating was about 80 in 2014. As you know, trying to make forms of good norms of good governance. We established 9 commissions, brought the Information Act, and with all that, trying to put the foundation right. From 80 to 105, we have gone down in our ease of doing business ranking. So working hard, we are trying to computerize all the agencies. By 2017, we'll computerize all the government agencies. And we are trying to, by 2018, we are trying to make it about, I think, ranking about 65. And by 2020, by about 55 to 20. So with this, we'll encourage more investments to come to the country. And as you know, the connection to global value chain was very minimal. And inconsistent policy making and changing of governments and the bureaucracy not being very strong. So we haven't put a solid foundation. So that is what our intention is, to put a solid foundation for the future. And we have actually done well with 3 ports being our main target: Hambantota Port, and Colombo and Trincomalee Port. Trincomalee being the natural 4th largest port and the 2nd largest, deepest port. And Hambantota already having a port with the Chinese government loan, and the loan interest was a bit high. So we have spoken to the Chinese government, equity debt swapped, and we are planning to improve Hambantota Port with the Chinese government and to have industrial zone, 15,000 acre industrial zone in Hambantota. And use the corridor. On the highway, actually, we are trying to improve another industrial zone in Kalutara and in Kurunegala as well. Comparatively, Sri Lanka, if you take actually with all the negatives I've told you with the war, we're not doing bad when you compare Sri Lanka with Vietnam, Bangladesh, Malaysia, if you take the growth rates, since Sri Lanka is a small country, we can pick up and run anytime we want because it's a small country. And as you see, the big countries, even though Malaysia, Thailand, all developing very fast, their growth rate is slower. So we have potential to grow fast. And as a result, making this location very important, a strategic location in Sri Lanka. The initiative by the Chinese president, the One Belt Initiative, giving life to the Silk Route again, the maritime Silk Route, the air Silk Route, and the land Silk Route. We can make Sri Lanka the gateway to South Asia. And as a result, we're trying to get into FTAs with China, India, the work is in process, Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia, so that we can take the advantage of the geographical position that we are in to make Sri Lanka a gateway not only to Asia, but to other regions as well, because it's close to Africa, Australia, and Southeast Asia, and Saudi Arabia as well. And it can be the hub in the Indian Ocean. So we have 3 international ports, 3 international airports, and internal connectivity and mobility as well. And we are trying to develop the infrastructure within about 3 years. So if we get our act right, we can commute between the corners of Sri Lanka within about 4 hours. That you can make Sri Lanka a country. In one day, you can take 4 seasons actually. If you have, in 4 hours, if you can commute to the other end of the country, within one day you can have 4 seasons. And it's development across the country. Few I would mention to you: Western Region Megapolis, Kandy City Development, Hambantota Port and Industry Investment Zone, and 2 economic corridors, Kandy Colombo Hambantota Economic Corridor and Kandy Trincomalee Economic Corridor. And whilst improving the education, we have I think we are blessed with a good literacy rate, about 95. I think we are on the right track. And as we experience, we get a lot of advice from the Harvard team, and they're working with us with the EDB, BOI, Export Development Board, and the BOI. And with all this, with the World Bank, with the ITC helping us, and we are just finishing our trade policy, and we are working on our export policy. Whilst doing all that, we have to take into consideration the sensitivities of the country as well. I think this is what we have to take what is good for our country. And I know the economic theory sometimes practically in politics when you use it, it's not easy. I will give you a good example. I think with all this good work, one thing I would like to see in Sri Lanka is by the leadership to take decisions very fast. Sometimes that is the key to success. Whether right or wrong, hopefully most of the decisions are right. But I would like to see decisions being taken fast. And I can see a little bit of a lull in Sri Lanka when it comes to decision taking. Probably it's because 2 governments in power. President is from one party and the Prime Minister is from my party. Probably that's one reason that the decisions are not being taken in a speedy way. I will give you a good example on this. We had I don't know whether you all saw it on television, on news. There's a garbage dump which collapsed and about 40 people died in Sri Lanka. And this garbage dump is close to my constituency in Kolonnawa. And whilst I was campaigning, the main complaint from all these citizens was that it's a stench, and that is the only thing that they asked from me was to remove this garbage dump. And I came and told my leaders, and I got an opportunity to go to cabinet one day, and then this came up, and I told the president, take decisions very fast, and we need to solve this. But since we didn't solve this, there were about 100 companies which wanted to actually get into this garbage disposal and creating power out of this, we couldn't take a decision. Another example is there was a LED bulb project by a company about 1.5 years ago. They approached us. And I was in the cabinet last week, and I saw even after 1.5 years, they were just still talking about the LED bulb factory. So decisions have not been taken, and I would like to see more decisions being taken by the government. I think other problem that we face is the objection by the public, especially my part of the world. People don't like change. As many of these eloquent speakers pointed out, in Asia, people don't like change that much. And when we bring industries, they always object, protest. So it's a delicate balance with the development and satisfying the masses also. So a solution for this is to have industrial zones. So a particular zone will have all the approvals. The approvals will be faster. Objections will be less. So the development will be faster. So that's one area that we are concentrating around Hambantota Port, about 3,000 acres in Hambantota, about 6,000 in Monoragala, and about 2,000 in Galle, and about 2,000 in Matara. And a Chinese company, a Thai company, Roshana, just approached us, and they are in Sri Lanka at the moment, looking at about 2,000 acres in Kalutara for an industrial park. And the other thing I would like to stress, I had a discussion with actually Ricardo when he was in Sri Lanka, and for 35% of the employers are in agriculture, and it's about 10% GDP out of agriculture. So it's a very sensitive topic in Sri Lanka. Paddy fields, it's part of our culture, and it's sacred to our people as well. So Ricardo asked me, how can you get these workers to get into other industries and the paddy fields to be used for other purposes? So I said it's a very delicate balance, a sensitive issue. When we were government in 2001, we tried to do that. We tried to develop a small area of paddy fields which were not cultivated, and that was the main slogan by the opposition, saying that we were destroying the paddy fields. So it's a delicate balance always, and the solution that we had with Ricardo we spoke about was start something, take a small acreage and start something and show them that this is what could be done. I think that's a good approach, so they will feel comfortable that something better can be done with these paddy fields. And the other thing is, as the speaker spoke about, employment, protectionism, populism. And as he said, Sri Lanka is have a mentality that you have to protect Sri Lanka, and probably because of our culture, we have not seen many foreigners working in Sri Lanka. But if you don't tell them that, if you don't actually bring laws, and through the BOI I can see a lot of foreigners are working in Sri Lanka. So that way, I think very, very slowly we can progress. We need about actually 200,000, 300,000 employers, and we kind of struggling to find employment from outside, and we need to bring from outside as well, but it's again a very sensitive issue in Sri Lanka. And other thing I would like to say, especially when we are getting GSP Plus, and that's a good news, by May 15th, and we got rid of the ban on fisheries ban, we got it off about 6 months ago. And I think this is a good indication that we are moving in the right direction. But this, when we discuss about, I just want to mention this factor. When we spoke about GSP, the United Nations, in the cabinet, there was this proposal. They spoke about sexual orientation, that no discrimination on sexual orientation. We have a law in Sri Lanka against homosexuality. That's an old law. So when this came up, we all agreed there shouldn't be discrimination. But what they have to understand, when they push countries like us, as you know, even in the West, even in the US and even in other countries in the Europe, that it took a long time for you all to get where you are. 30, 40 years, but sometimes the West expects the rest of the world also in evolution to follow you as soon as they reach something. They have not even reached there. So we said we understand, but you have to think of the masses in the country, their culture, their religion, and we have to, it's a delicate balance, as you know, developing the country, and as politicians we have to make sure that we stay in power also when we are doing good. Otherwise we won't be able to do good. Another government will come in and the policies will change, and it may be a dictatorial government as well. So the good work we have done, we have to preserve it for the future. And I thank Ricardo and the team for giving us assistance, and you all have done wonderful workshops in Sri Lanka and giving me the opportunity and wonderful forum. Thank you very much.